See, I'm just gonna ride the wave until the morning sun. If I just speak into existence, it's already done. It's already done. It's already done. If I just speak into existence, it's already done.
SissyMarySue Education Fund, a nonprofit 501c3, presents our podcast featuring inclusive voices. Welcome to our podcast called Educating Empathy. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you enjoy the journey with us. This is really exciting because I get to introduce Dr. Toby Tomlinson Baker, and I am thrilled that she is our very, very first guest. I suppose I should tell you who I am. My name is Dr. Wendy Mulhauser, aka children's author SissyMarySue, and I am just over the moon to be able to start this journey with this dear, dear friend of mine. What we want to say, though, right away from both of us, how are you? We care deeply about all of our listeners, and we just want to offer our empathy and our concern about your lives and who you are and what you're going through. It's a challenging paradigm, most recently the last couple of years. And so we really want to be mindful about that and make sure that you hear our concern and our empathy. So we want to start that way, but let's get started. I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint about who you get to hear from today. Dr. Tomlinson Baker has a PhD from Pepperdine University. I'm going to let her tell you the specifics of what that degree is. But I also want to share with you that she is an illustrious, wonderful, formidable board member on our board of directors with SissyMarySue Education Fund. This is a nonprofit 501c3. We have some very exciting initiatives. One of the co-chairs of the College Planning Committee. The College Planning Committee is engaged in a strategic plan of 5 to 10 years from now to launch a college. We are in the process of planning the college, and I am thrilled that she and Dr. Greg Williams are serving as the chairs. We have many more initiatives with SissyMarySue Education Fund, so if you're interested in the other exciting things we're doing, please visit www.SissyMarySue.org. That is SissyMarySue.org, SissyMarySue.org. So gosh, let's just jump in and find out more about the amazing Dr. Toby Tomlinson Baker. She is so much more than the small amount of things that I got to say in the beginning. I have a list of questions, but let's first start with Dr. Tomlinson Baker to find out a little bit more about her degree, her PhD from Pepperdine. Welcome, Dr. Tomlinson Baker.
Actually, it's Dr. Baker, but that's okay. So here's the thing. My name is Toby Tomlinson Baker. Here's the reason I have to use my middle name.
Okay.
So there's a football player named Toby Baker. If you Google Toby Baker, this cute football player comes up, and I said, oh my gosh, I need to put my middle name in there. So my middle name is Tomlinson, so that's why I'm Toby Tomlinson Baker.
Okay.
And so, but I go by Dr. Baker, no biggie, and people call me Tomlinson Baker all the time, but that's fine. And,
thank you.
But you can call me Toby, so and that's fine with me. And so I went to Pepperdine University. Initially, I got my undergrad at Adelphi University in New York, Long Island. That's the same university as Jonathan Larson, and there's a movie out right now about Jonathan Larson called Tick, Tick, Boom. But so I went to Adelphi, and majored in theater because I love performing. And so, but then I also got a master's in education from Cabrini University in Pennsylvania. And then I moved west because it's nice and warm in Southern California. And then I got my PhD at Pepperdine University. So, and I just recently graduated last year. And
in what? In what? PhD in?
A PhD in educational leadership. It's global educational leadership. So we did a little bit of global, a little bit of, all education, and then global meaning, I actually took a trip to China, and I was the only one in my cohort. There were about 40 of us in my cohort. I was the only special educator in my
Really?
cohort. Yep. There were a lot of business people. There were a lot of entrepreneurs and, people who are on the, Fortune 500 millionaires who had nothing else to do but go get a PhD. So, and so I was an educator, and I'm also a full-time educator. I know that one of your upcoming questions is probably going to be about where I teach. So I currently teach in Los Angeles, California, and I teach in East Los Angeles. So I work at a school that is primarily 99.99999 of Latino. I am the only Caucasian teacher at the school. And so I serve all those students. I've done that for 10 years now. I've always worked in I want to say low income district of socioeconomic status. And I've always served students who receive support for homelessness, families for homelessness. And so that has always interested me, was how can we support all of these students equally? Why is it that, a student who is white receives more than those who are of color? Right. So that's one of the reasons I continue to teach in East Los Angeles, even though I'm the only Caucasian teacher. And wow. I like the school, I like the people, and I want to serve them. So during COVID-19, though, sadly, I had to be in my dining room with a chandelier hanging over me while I was on Zoom with the students. And what I noted about the difference, what it was like during COVID, was that many of my students did not have homes, and they would often be in a public place on Zoom. They couldn't get Wi-Fi during Zoom. They couldn't do their assessments during Zoom. They couldn't. Right. A lot of them were left with a brother or sister while their parent was not there, or if that's when I know one of my students from last year was always in a car because his family was living out of a car.
What ages do you teach?
So I teach, I have a K through 12 certification. I teach second and third grade special education, learning disability.
Super. What was it like in a COVID-19 pandemic paradigm in comparison to your teaching at other times?
So what I noted mostly with my the students whom I serve in East Los Angeles, who are primarily of low income and of Latino background, and what I found is that because they come from a low socioeconomic status, there tends to be high homelessness rate. And so I found that a lot of my students were doing their schoolwork out of their cars. Their families were living out of their cars. Sometimes they were in a public place like a McDonald's or a public restaurant where they were trying to get Wi-Fi. And they didn't always have family support. And then another difference is that the families, it was hard enough for, we saw a lot of news in the news about parents becoming the teacher at home.
Right.
When you have money and there's such a gap between the high income and the low income, the high income parents were putting videos of their new classroom setup for their kids,
right,
and decorating their rooms for their kids, when my students don't have that source of income and support. Therefore, a lot of times they were left with a brother or sister. They didn't have somebody speaking English to help them complete assessments. I actually, so if I may share this story, when we returned last April to in-person setting, I actually, we were trying to complete an online assessment for, I guess it was in English or math or whatever it was. And I had a third grade student. Her house was literally across the street from the school. And her mom could not find one of the computer buttons to access the test. And the parent was frustrated, couldn't find it. After about 20 minutes, I did the right thing, but the wrong thing. I actually left the school building, climbed the fence, went over with a mask, welcomed me into her home. I left school property so that I could help the parent. So was I wrong to leave school property to help the parent in need? And so where I came, I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. It took me 20 seconds. I ran in, pushed the button for her, and where her frustration went right away.
Wow.
And she was okay again. And then I ran back in, and my assistant let me in the back door, and I ran back to the classroom. So, so, for me, I really just wanted to do whatever I had to do to support my students. Plus, they're disabilities, and their families. They also have other students who may have disabilities. So that's kind of what it was like. There's a difference between being in school when you have all the administrative support, as opposed to being at home or helping the families when they become the teachers.
Sure. And you spoke so well about the fact that our kids in a lower economic status had a tremendous difficulty in gaining access to internet. It was a huge challenge for them. And you recognize that, and we're greatly concerned, and we're problem solving. Good for you to find that way. Keep on moving with this next kind of thing. That's been a huge concern of mine, because so many kids didn't have access, and they still don't. I think buses should drive around with internet so that every child has.
That would be so great.
Every child has it, and they just park in neighborhoods. There are probably people who've already thought about this.
Do it. When do you do that?
I think our SissyMarySue, we should have a van for doing other things, and we always have internet for people. But anyway, back to you. Your teaching skills are highly recognized. And it's so fantastic. And, I want you to speak to these. I think, is it a later question where I talk about what they are? I believe that you were given a Teacher of the Year award more than once. And that's incredible. And I want you to speak about that. And then
they weren't actually, I only received the Teacher of the Year once. But I received other awards, so I don't want to go around saying, "Oh yes, I've had Teacher of the Year for so many years." No.
Okay.
So clarify. I mean, I love winning awards; it's great and everything, but you have to go back to what did I do to actually recognize.
Okay. So sorry to interrupt. So with these questions. No. We'll go ahead and go back to, I'll go back to this then, because I talk about that later. Yeah. Your teaching skills are highly recognized. And I wanted to unpack that, or I wanted to investigate that a little bit further. What do you think gives you the skills that you possess to be recognized? But more importantly, why does your teaching resonate with your students the way it does? What gives you this gift? What gives you the passion that you have? Can you speak about that with us?
Absolutely. So the thing is, I actually have received Teacher of the Year for Chad, and but the year after that, I received a different award for research from the LDA, Learning Disabilities Association, called the Harrison Sylvester Award. And they're two very different awards. One of them is the first one that I won for the teacher award was just the teacher of the year and teaching students with disabilities. Now, I usually don't broadcast that I have a learning disability and ADHD as well, but for the Harrison Sylvester Award, that is for somebody with dyslexia or with ADHD or who has a disability.
Sure.
And so when I received that, I very much spoke to the fact that my research is all about me in a sense. Now, you did an ethnography. I chose not to, and I deliberately went towards focusing on faculty because as a teacher, I want to help other teachers know how to teach students with disabilities.
Nice.
That's where it comes from. Now, here's the thing. In school myself with a disability as a student, I did not have teachers who knew they were all nice people. My teachers were not mean. I didn't hate my teachers. They didn't know how to teach me a different way.
Right.
And that is where in my classroom now, people think I'm crazy. I'm like batty crazy. They're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm teaching. And they're like, you're having too much fun to teach. And I'm like, that's right.
Yes.
So, I play in my classroom, which speaks very much to what you do with the play.
Wonderful.
You're playing all the time. Your kids are out of your seat. And in my mind, I'm thinking, because I know how it feels when the teacher said, stay in your seat. I say to my students, okay, get out of your seat and go run, because that's what they need to do. And then they come back and they have it. And that's how I teach differently. Those are my skills. Those are the skills that I have that are different. And I think in a way, without sounding, I'll say the word, cocky or arrogant, it makes me a better teacher. Because I'm there with the kid. I know what it's like to sit there and not get it. And there's something that you just can't get. One of the one of my own accommodations, I always preach, you've got to know your accommodations. One of my accommodations is explaining a different way. And teachers don't do that enough. They think, okay, move to the front of the class, give extra time, have a study buddy. That's not what I need all the time. Sometimes I need absolute quiet, so I can't have background noise. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem when I'm taking a test.
Right.
And I'm literally looking at my peer that I'm jealous of and wondering, what number is she on? No, I can't have that. So I need a separate room to take tests. I know my testing, when I have tests, that's what I have to do. So I understand when, I have a student who can't focus because he sees his friend over there, how can I do a test with one student when the other, they're watching each other. So I'm very sensitive and understanding of my students. I understand, they've been sitting for 20 minutes. Okay, everybody get up. Now I tell them all day, you'll see me saying, go sit down, go sit down. They're all out of their seats and they know that means they can get it. Go get a tissue, go get water, go get this, go get your pencil, that's an excuse to get out of your seat.
Absolutely.
Oh, you dropped your pencil, go pick it up. Even though I say we're going to go over the rules, you know what? We deviate from the lesson plans every day because that's what we do.
Right.
And we have to.
Yes.
So,
yes.
You can't just have teachers who have on the board, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do I have 20 things on my board. If I get 2 things done, I'm happy. It's okay.
That's really fantastic.
Okay. And teachers have to be okay with themselves and stop comparing themselves to, well, what did the team get done?
Yes.
Or what do my team's scores? Test scores, I don't like test scores.
Yes.
Don't compare the kids because first of all, we all know, and that's the other thing. I want the kids to like coming to school. I tell them every day. I didn't always like going to school because I always felt like the teacher didn't like me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want the kids to know, yes, I do like you, even though I tell you to sit down and keep your hands to yourself. But I want them to like school, and that makes them feel good about themselves. I always tell them, you all know how to read, even if I know deep down they don't. I tell them, you all know how to read, so I expect you to. And then all of a sudden they have this self-fulfilling prophecy of, oh, Miss Baker said I know how to read, so and then they start doing it.
Yes.
It's the weirdest thing. They all of a sudden are like, and that's when I kind of let the peer pressure a little bit. I'm like, he's doing it, you better do it too, because then they start look like, oh, I better do it because my best friend's doing it. And then they start reading.
Sure.
Or they start doing the math. We're doing multiplication tables right now. You know what? I've got my poor second graders who are doing arrays and pictures and stuff. That's multiplication. So sometimes I have to do whole group instruction. Things never go your way. I just recently had, my class size became, a whole, a couple, doubled, more than doubled. And you know what? The more the merrier. If they need the services, I'm happy to teach them. I would never turn anybody away.
Let me back up with that a moment for a couple of things. I want to back up to so that the listeners can understand why all of a sudden, as a teacher in California, are you getting extra students? What's happening in your area in that way?
Well, that's an interesting thing.
As a result of COVID, the COVID pandemic.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
No worries.
So as a result of COVID, I think it's even maybe before COVID, there's been a decrease in teachers entering the field. And there's scientific studies about why people are leaving the teaching field. I have no desire to leave the teaching field, even if I move into higher education, because I'm also a Cal State faculty member. I've taught special education law at Cal State, but when I'm teaching my my K through 12 students, my 2 and 3 students, here's what I've noticed, that because we're not getting a quality of teachers, because people are leaving the profession, COVID has exacerbated that and given them an excuse to leave. Because now there's 2 different things. One, they're just leaving. They're retiring early, leaving and going and doing other jobs,
right?
For survival or whatever, and kind of using COVID as an excuse. And 3, they can work online now, so they can use that. They can take illness days. We had one teacher, she has the whole year off for health reasons. And, if that's truly the case, that's one thing. So, and I think a lot of people, there's 33,000 teachers that's a rough number, but 33 in LA teaching at the Los Angeles Unified School District. So I'm sure that it's coming down all over the place. And we just have a brand new superintendent. Meanwhile, what I'm seeing is, besides, obviously, we all hate masks. Everybody hates wearing masks. I'd rather see, it's hard for facial, you can't see people's lips, especially when you're doing, I have students with speech and language impairments, SLIs, so that's a whole other thing. I can't hear very well sometimes. I have a hearing disability. But some of the things that I notice for teachers is they don't enjoy it as much they don't enjoy teaching as much because of COVID.
Yes.
And it's the as far as the enrollment of the students, because I know that's what you mentioned, they're leaving the district. They've been leaving, but now it's much worse. They're leaving and leaving.
Right.
But what happened is, and I don't even know the reason, they've closed a lot of classrooms in California and they're all coming into my room. And I keep wondering, how come I'm still there? I wonder why all these people are coming to me. And I'm thinking, I must be a really great teacher. So,
you are. They trust you because from what you've shared with me, Toby, from what you've shared with me as a friend and as a colleague, and is that that you have been somebody who's escaped being sick. You have this amazing immune system, and even under this immense pressure, given the kinds of challenges and challenges that you've gone through and the resiliency that you have, you continue to be able to handle all of these new students all of a sudden, and all of these paradigm shifts in ways that maybe your colleagues are struggling with.
Here's why I'm going to interrupt. I have empathy. I know how that child feels coming in. I've been that student when I was the one going out and switching schools. I had to switch schools 6 times.
Right.
Right into what you say about having empathy.
Right.
I love my general ed colleagues. They can't wait to get rid of the students. It's a terrible way to put it. They are waiting and waiting for these students to get out of their classrooms. And so you can look at it a positive switch. They want to not have to serve the students, but the positive is that finally these students are going to get the services that they they've needed for 3 years. Why? And here's another problem because of COVID, there was no assessment for the students who needed assessment.
Wow.
Psychological assessment.
Right.
Psychologists. The fact, for 10 years now, we've had a different school psychologist at my school site. And why is that? Why do we keep having turnover? There's tons of teacher turnover, speech therapist turnover, services, turnover. Is it just our school, or is it all schools? Is it?
Right.
I don't actually have the answer, but I just know at our school, tons of turnover. And then is it because of the kids and the parents and the community? I stay there because I know they need more. Yeah. Why? And that goes back to your whole theme, which is why I connected with you. Why are the best teachers, or the white Caucasian wealthy teachers, teaching in the white Caucasian wealthy areas?
Right.
Why not serve the students who need us the most? And so I deliberately go to the neediest places to work.
I love that about.
I'm crazy. They think I'm nuts.
I love that about you, and that resonates with me too. That's a part of why we have this closeness, because I did the same thing when I was teaching. I taught in inner city schools quite a bit with my projects with Jelly Beans Creative Learning, my education business, and then I taught as a full-time teacher as well. I do want to go back to something else that just struck me as so powerful that you said, and it was, I encourage my students to ask it another way.
Oh yeah.
Wow. I love that.
That's not an accommodation. When I have to fill out an accommodation, and then I do this in my seminars and stuff too. If I tell this to people with disabilities, there's and I even corrected somebody at Pepperdine one time. They had, at their accommodation form, it says extra time, for tests and copies of PowerPoints or whatever, like the extra time on tests, and there's 3 standards, move to the front of the class. There are easy fixes that all colleges can do. And then there's a box that says other. Why? I hate that box. They should already, it's like, I feel like they should know me enough that they don't have to ask me. And why do I have to tell them? They should already know. And I'm kind of, hurt a little bit that I have to put in, need things explained to me a different way.
Right.
And so I always end up writing something like that in.
Right.
And then, of course, I have to remind the professors to do that because they forget. And yeah, so there is an absolute difference. And this is what my whole dissertation is, that there's such a difference between the K through 12 IDEA services, which are written and validated. There's processed cases, and the administration are on their stuff pretty much. Even when they're out of compliance, they know they're out of compliance and they're trying to fix it.
Right.
College, everything is optional. And I just most colleges will tell you, if you don't like the school, don't apply here. And so that's why I'm so excited for your 10-year venture, which I think will come sooner than that. So,
Sure. No, and I love hearing you stretch out with all of this, and I want to go back a little bit more with it and say this. I know I'm speaking the obvious, but I want to say it out loud. You are communicating such deep empathy for students, looking at your history, your own experience, and you are applying it so beautifully in your classroom with how you care for your students as individuals, as people needing something said a different way, your latitude that you offer your students in having, like you said, you have this large list of things on a board, but as a teacher, you choose to not be upset with yourself or your students if you only get to 2 items.
And that's something important for the teachers, because I think teachers beat themselves up.
Yes, indeed. And what I love that. And what I think is so fantastic about it, and I know I'm speaking the obvious again to many, but I want to say it out loud, and that is, you are demonstrating that flexibility and latitude, and being able to change on the fly is your skill set. And it is a strength of yours. And it also translates into your students then finding their own power, their own confidence, because I believe you're communicating something very profound to your students in operating that way. Because when you flex, you are showing your students, I value you.
Yeah.
You don't have to just fit my format. Is that fair to say?
Oh, very much so. Because I remember, and that's one of the reasons I switched schools so much, is that because in the 80s, 86, 87, 88, 89, teachers had, and they do, I have a curriculum. I deviate from the curriculum because I'm a terrible teacher who doesn't follow the curriculum all the time, and I have to supplement and wiggle with students with special needs.
Sure.
But in the 80s, when the teacher said so, you did it. So I sat at a desk for 4 hours in the afternoon in my own little world, and I didn't know that I had ADHD at the time because I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD till I was in my 40s.
Okay. 40, really? In your 40s? Wow. I think you shared that before. Yeah. That's really incredible.
So, in the 80s, I was diagnosed as a child with a learning disability. And I was slower than everybody else. That's usually what it looks like. It took me longer to do everything. My handwriting was terrible. And I always had on my comments from the teachers, like, it doesn't pay attention, needs to pay attention, my attention. And then when I was an adult and they said, you have ADHD, the doctor told me I had ADHD, and my husband was laughing. And he's like, yeah, we've known that we've known that for years. Sure. And I said, I have ADHD. And then I was so depressed for like a day. Like, I have ADHD. He's like, this is Toby. Wait, your whole life. And I'm like, you're right.
That's adorable. Let me back you. I want to back you up a little bit with that. Tell me more specifically why that felt depressing to you when you heard that kind of diagnosis. What was it that you felt? Tell me about that.
2 things. One, how come nobody had found it as a child? And that's because I'm a girl.
Sure. Really?
I researched it. You know me, I'm a research dork. So I Google research and did research everything.
Okay.
Just ridiculous things. One, women in their 30s and 40s, and you can Google this and Google Scholar this and whatever. Women in their 30s to 40s who think they're going through menopause, have come out and found that it's actually ADHD.
Wow. I didn't know that.
The other thing.
Okay.
The children, little boys in the 70s and 80s, they were all on Ritalin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the little boys ADHD, put them on Ritalin. That's little girl who talks a lot and doesn't pay attention. Oh, she's such a cute little girl. Let's put her on ponytail.
Yeah.
She's so cute.
Yeah. And then they just think she's
so
over
bubbly, friendly, talkative, not ADHD.
Sure.
Girls were not identified.
That makes sense, doesn't it? Wow.
Why would you identify a bubbly, friendly little girl?
Wow. That is so interesting because it's how we're socialized as girls.
Doctors, we were talking earlier about men and women. The men doctors would probably not look at a little girl as much as they would look at a little boy to see if they have ADHD.
Interesting. Wow.
Just a little tidbit. So I think also it was like, I felt like my personality was changing or something, or that somehow
you mean your identity? I'm sorry to interrupt, but was it like a sense of trying to figure out your identity?
Yeah. I had always just been, this one, LD, a little bit slow and needs more, I need no distractions. That's the ADHD. But at the time, it didn't matter. It was, learning disability. It takes me, and I realized this, this is an interesting little thing. I was going to be a lawyer. So I went to UCLA and I woke up this is me because I'm crazy. I woke up one morning and
you are not crazy.
I'm crazy.
You are not.
I was 39 or 38 or 39. I woke up one morning, I said, I'm going to be a special education lawyer.
Really?
I woke up and I was like, I'm going to do it because, I'm crazy. So I said, okay, I'm very, I want to say, all right, what do I have to do first? What I have to think Covey, begin with the end in mind. All right, I want the degree. What do I have to do first? So I have to do this. I have to take the LSAT. All right, if I have to take the LSAT, I have to take classes to take the LSAT. So I took LSAT classes at UCLA. I'm in the classes and they asked me to read something. They gave us 7 minutes.
Okay.
I'm looking at the person on the left, looking at the person on the right, and they finished.
Sure.
In the 7 minute, and I only got halfway down, and I went, I need extra time. Like, that's literally what I need, my extra time.
Right. You identified that. You saw that.
Oh no, I need my extra time.
Yeah. I hear you.
Then that's when I got assessed again, and that was a whole story. I wrote an article that's coming out in July, I think, in a special ed magazine about assessment and how finding a psychologist was not an easy task because I'm not a student. And
Really?
Oh, that's a whole other podcast.
Interesting.
It's a whole other podcast. I was in tears for 2 weeks because I'm a special educator, so I'm privy to the test. So they had to find a different test for me to take.
Okay.
Johnson.
Okay.
And so then I also had to figure out who would do this, and nobody assessed adults. They all said, oh, I only do students, I only do students, I only do students, and I only do children, I only do children. And it was really hard because I'm very goal-oriented. And I was like, nothing's going to stop me. I don't care if I have to fly somewhere in the country, I'm getting it done.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. So one of the things that I, again, take back to my students, I tell them constantly, I'm like, don't ever let anybody tell you you can't do something, because you can. If I can find somebody in the whole country that will assess an adult, when I got no, I don't take no from anyone. So I just don't.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I make a lot of enemies that way, but I'm my number one quality is loyalty. When I'm loyal to somebody, there's nothing that gets them. And I'm loyal to SissyMarySue. I'm loyal.
Definitely. Oh my gosh.
Loyal.
Absolutely.
Once I'm loyal, there's no deviating.
Goodness.
So my students, once you're my student, that's it. I'm going to take care of you. So
that's so beautiful. You have a level of commitment like that. And I know that of you. Let's dovetail, or not dovetail, but let's go on to you talking about how you affirm and encourage your college age students with understanding teaching students with disability. And then I also think that you teach policy, right? Tell us what you teach at a college level and where you teach.
So I teach at Cal State University in Los Angeles. I did one semester there, and which was interesting for me because it was just what I wanted. I loved it. I enjoyed it so much. It was interesting to me that I actually had students with disabilities in the class. And so I actually applied everything that I was teaching them. I was actually doing and modeling as I was doing it.
Nice.
So it was, just even the laws of, should these students get these accommodations? Okay. So, and then I was doing that for my students. So I talked earlier a little bit about faculty in higher education. Once I stepped into that role, I knew what to do. I found, that many faculty don't know higher education law. When you get hired, you go home and you start setting up your syllabus. You don't go home and read case law. Well, I already knew the case law. I know the laws. I know what, what I'm allowed to do and I'm not allowed to do. And what I found in my case study from Pepperdine is that my subjects, they didn't know, my participants didn't know the law. They kept wondering, well, what do I have to do not to get fired? What do I have to do so that I can keep my job? And I think a lot of special, just in general, K through 12 educators feel the same way. Do I have to let that student in my classroom? Do I have to do this? Do I have to send this homework?
Wow.
They want to know where the parameters are. So what's the minimum that I have to do so I don't break the law? And the problem is they don't even know what the law is.
Yes.
I asked them, I said, do you know what IDEA is? Do you know what ADA is? Do you know what the, none of them, literally none of them.
Wait, can I back you up with that?
Oh,
that's so fascinating to me. So when teachers get a special ed degree, do they have a considerable amount of classes with law that they're learning?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me more. But yet it's not enough.
General ed teachers do not. So the question, and even like at Fielding or your college, how many of them are special educators and how many of them aren't? At some like Pepperdine, we have all the math department. They don't have special ed degrees. The Spanish department, they don't have special ed degrees.
Sure. I see.
Some of them have never even taught.
Sure. I know. I understand this now. I guess I misunderstood because I was thinking I was incorrect in thinking that you only teach teachers who teach in special ed. So that was where I was misunderstanding that. But still, when you okay, got it. So, but yet even when we think about it in that regard, it is really unfortunate that teachers across the board don't know disability law because they are bound to have students with special needs, right?
Yes. Well, it's funny because two of my study participants, this is interesting. They didn't know special ed law.
Okay.
They had disabilities themselves.
What? Wait, seriously?
Seriously? That's what I said. I kind of went, oh my gosh, head slap. Really?
Wow.
And then another participant had a child with Down syndrome, and again, had no idea beyond ADA law. So,
wait a minute. They had a child with Down syndrome, but they had they weren't informed.
They have been to IEP meetings, but they have not read the IDEA law.
Wow.
Or taken a class that dissects IDEA law.
Sure.
So this was if there was a person in the health department or that's their area of expertise, or, the political science department, they might not have actually had a class that goes through, where special educators, we have to sit there for a year and dissect IDEA, the law, the this, the that, how to do the process and talk to parents and so forth. Many educators have not. And that goes back to why are they leaving the profession? Because of the enrollment uptake of students with disabilities, it has dampened the general education teachers who have said, well, I'm not teaching students with disabilities. I'll retire. I'll leave. I'll go to business. I'll go to what, and they leave.
Wow.
So it's not only, it's because it's actually supported the leaving of the teachers of leaving the profession.
Can I ask you a question? This has been on my mind for a while. Years ago, a really good friend of mine whose child was in one of my classes was a head special ed teacher in her department. Mm-hmm. And I remember her having a conversation with me about this notion. Mm-hmm. She said, why is it? And she said, and I'm not the only one who thinks this, but she says, why is it that there's something separate? Because what you're talking about now, when you think that anybody who needs accommodations needs to be in their own place together and separate them out, really doesn't make sense. And it makes sense to have all teachers value every learner and to have every learner be able to always be together. It's that inclusion piece, right? So the fact that I'm not asking that or saying it very clearly, but
you're saying it perfectly, Wendy.
Okay.
Here's the thing. There's two schools of thought.
Okay.
There's the inclusion supporters, and then there are the, I'm in a special day class. It's self-contained, they call it.
Okay.
I want to work in California, so I'm in a self-contained class, second and third graders.
Okay.
My personal view is that all students should just be mainstream. There should be either a
correct
teacher, and
mine
so
too.
My personal view of what's actual theory of what is the best way to run a class, that would be inclusion. But that's not the way. If I want to have a job and go to work every day and get a paycheck, I have to go with what the district has and suck it up and decide to make the best of the full, self-contained special day class. I'm not for it theoretically, but I have a pretty awesome self-contained class. So,
well, I have to say, you have an awesome self-contained class because of the skills and the heart that you bring to the table and to your kiddos. I know that absolutely that, that's why, because from that friend's perspective, and then from some of the experience over the years when I subbed, when there's a classroom that doesn't have a loving, empowering, individual, you end up having classrooms where it's so sad, but the kids just feed off each other, and they're just, they bully each other. They could be unkind to each other, and it ends up being this noisy, awful environment because there isn't enough, what I think is so beautiful in education, there isn't enough variety, all different personalities, all different learners, all different everything. That's where it is the best space, like we both feel, because when it's a concentrated population of kiddos who have extreme behaviors, then that is just too many extreme behaviors in one small space, unless there's a skilled teacher. It's not
only behaviors, but it's also, there's no growth going on if they're their non-disabled peers don't have that growth aspect.
Indeed. I'll tell you very quickly, I won't stay on this very long, but that same friend and I went for a grant for her high functioning, what were they?
It's okay, whatever they were.
Emotional, the EBD, emotional behavior disordered students. So we got a grant to do that work. And when I saw that up close, I saw what she had been kind of talking about. And it was quite interesting, but we did play for learning. We did creative, innovative kinds of things. And we saw that their social, emotional skills were increasing because of it. Anyway, but we'll get back to you. And you
can get right back to me, because my very first teaching job was in Philadelphia in an emotional support classroom with 6th to 8th graders.
Really?
All African American.
Toby, I didn't know that.
Of course.
Interesting.
Philadelphia.
Wow. And then EBD. EBD. Okay.
Better in LA.
Okay. Oh, wait, say that again.
Yeah. The weather is better in LA than it is in Minnesota. So
or Philadelphia. I so get that. I so get that.
19 degrees there. No. Yeah.
I love it. Oh, absolutely.
People in LA think 56 is cold.
You do. I know it. You really do. It's just so funny, because I grew up in Alaska.
But for 3 years, I did. I worked in an ED classroom, and then a 4th and 5th grade, all African American, a different demographic.
Okay.
And then I worked in a low income, all white students, Caucasian students, but all low income, uneducated parents, a lot of foster care or foster youth.
Okay.
So
Wow.
I've never had the privilege of being in the uppity, really great settings, but I've never chosen to apply to those places.
Sure. And, I get that. And I want to ask you a little bit more about that. And what drew you, what draws you to that?
I have no idea. I think, I was thinking about my qualities and my values. Equity is number one.
Sure.
Equity and loyalty.
Yes.
I just don't think it's fair. When I see something that's wrong, I try to fix it and act like, superhero, and then I get trampled on. And you were talking about that earlier, sometimes I'm so invested in my ideas that I'm like gung-ho about it. And then sometimes it's great and sometimes it backfires. And, there were times, when I was teaching in Philadelphia, I remember I remember I was leaving for work one day and I looked across the street and I saw one of my students' parents getting arrested for drugs. And I was like, okay, that can't be good. So,
right.
And then, I felt helpless and I went home the whole time. And then, there's only so much I can do. So, and, I've had students in Los Angeles where I've had to call foster care youth and, or call, child support services and so forth. And, I think as teachers, there's only so much we can do in the classroom. We can do, you can't save everybody and take everybody home. And you always have that one student that you want to take home.
Right.
But,
Absolutely. I felt that oftentimes when I was teaching in Brooklyn Center or North Minneapolis. I so get that. I'm sure you feel this way too, and let me know if this resonates with you. I don't think I know that I don't feel like I'm a hero in any way by teaching in inner city. Right. I know what and you don't either. We're not saying, we're saving everybody. But what you were speaking to, you said equity is really important.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we both see that all children deserve to be served with education and with great teachers and with great materials. And so that's what you and I, it seems, both respond to. And so we want to make sure that we are serving in ways where people might not have the same advantages as people do in communities with a really large tax base, which is another conversation altogether. That it shouldn't even be set up that way. Every child in every community should have the same kinds of opportunities. So I know I'm so grateful that you're called to teach in a school that that is Latino, is Latino, and
Latinx or whatever. I mean, I
let me back up. Let me back up. Let me say it one more time so I can get it on the thing. Okay, so I say it right. Okay, so I'm so grateful that you teach in a school that's Latinx, and that you are serving in that way, and you're called to serve in that way. I do want to remind you at some point too. I do have a translation of Jelly Beans, Achita, and Hope in Spanish. And so we need to teach a class I need to just do a pro bono class for you. What's up?
You speak Spanish?
Un poquito. Yeah, I do speak a little bit.
I don't speak Spanish. I mean, I took Spanish.
Really? Wait, back up. Really?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
I can understand it, and I sound like a horrible person trying to speak Spanish. And one time, I mean, I actually made I was sitting, this is a couple years ago. I was sitting in I literally know a few words like, hola, ¿cómo está? Bien, y like it's baby. So I just say that I don't know it. Okay. And so, because it's I'm not truly embarrassed. I'm just, I'm like, it's embarrassing to go, hola, ¿cómo está?
It's okay.
It was an IEP meeting they were translating, and I'm reading the IEP, and I said, in Mathematicus, Jose, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe I just said mathematic, So and they all broke out laughing, and they're like,
that's cool.
I'm trying to speak Spanish.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for listening, and thank you for coming along on this journey through a conversation today. SissyMarySue Education Fund's Educating Empathy podcast is available to you all. As we say goodbye, we want to share that we hope that you are well, and we send our love and our empathy. Until next time, tune in to part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Toby Tomlinson Baker, Friday, March 18th.